it so much you may even get tired of winning.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition. It takes a little time.
Welcome to Is It Bad for the Economy? The podcast where we explore whether Trump's policies are helping the economy, hurting, or just a load of hot air. I'm Democratic media consultant Kobi Tirey, and I'm trying to figure out how Democrats can finally get the credit they deserve for outperforming Republicans on the economy for essentially my entire lifetime. And here to keep me honest is anonymous full-time financial practitioner, Banker Bill. Washington, D.C. is under occupation by National Guardsmen taking selfies on the mall. The Trump administration is exercising literal National Socialism by taking a 10% federal stake in Intel, and another member of the Fed is being threatened with legal action. We're recording this on Friday, August 22nd, amongst yet another Friday night Epstein news dump. But today we're talking about an existential issue that's got macroeconomists and arch-conservatives panicking, while Democrats look on from the sidelines hoping to catch a bone. It's the silver tsunami, the demographic disaster, plummeting fertility rates, not just nationwide, but worldwide. Banker Bill is a newish father. I'm a childless heathen. But first, let's run through the numbers. Last year in the United States, 2.8 million Americans died, 3.6 million Americans were born, and the CBO estimates that we got 3.3 net million immigrants on top of that. What's the problem?
Well, there's no problem today. I think the forward-looking outlook is if immigration falls and the United States isn't as receptive to immigration as it has been in the past, we have fewer people being born, fewer children being born, then that puts a strain on the labor force, increases in the short term the costs related to anything for labor, and then in the long term reduces ultimate economic output through innovation. And the speed run for all of this has been Japan, who's notably had a low fertility rate, but well below replacement rate for, effectively my entire life. Haven't been particularly pro-immigration over that time, while their fertility rate has continued to fall. In Japan, 95, 96, 97% of all people there are Japanese. And as a matter of fact, Japan's population has started to fall. And the current projections are that, by the time you and I are old men, Japan will have lost 25 to 30% of its current population if there's no change in current policy or fertility rates.
Well, if I know anything from Japanese pop culture, the answer clearly must be humanoid robots. But in terms of the economic impacts that may be holding the Japanese economy down or holding the Japanese worker down, what are they experiencing now that we want to make sure we're not experiencing 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
They've been in a period of secular stagnation for decades. Consumption's falling. They're in outright deflation. They're not as productive anymore as they used to be. Their output per worker has fallen from, 11th to 25th in our lifetime, and probably going to fall further, mainly because they don't have a population, a workforce to rely upon to drive any economic output forward.
It makes a lot of sense to me that a decreasing population leads to a weakening nation in the long term. But how are we supposed to prioritize this issue compared to our national debt? Is this the thing that we need to be worrying about to solve all those problems? Or is this the distraction that's going to solve itself in the background because we're talking about 30, 50-year trends, so there's really not that much we can actually do about them with the levers that we have available to us right now?
My view is, at least for the United States, matters like fertility and household formation are connected to something like the national debt. And those are long-term policy choices that we make as a society, basically through Congress.
Is this a 10-year problem? A 30-year problem, a 50-year problem?
I'm a big college football fan, and something that's come up is the population wall that's coming in 2026 through 2028 of children that were born in 2008 and thereafter, because there were far fewer children born when the financial crisis hit. Basically, for the cycle, fertility peaked in 2007 and then has never come back from the long downtrend it's been on. It reset itself, a new downtrend. And with that, you're not seeing as many college students enroll for sports or for school in general. So even though a higher proportion of students are going to college, to a university, the gross number of people being born is falling. And so there's concerns among, college sports that, we won't be able to get the athletes that we want to be competitive. And so the top teams, they'll always get the cream of the crop, but the lower teams, I'm not going to name any schools, but the teams that aren't as competitive in certain sports, they may have to fold up their sports program because they won't have anyone to compete.
One of the most frustrating ironies of this moment in history is that all of the diehard tribalists are in politics, and all of the statistical and accounting wonder kids are spending all of their time on sports. The fact that college football fans are even more ahead of this than some economists because they're worried about a bad vintage year of incoming recruits, that's something.
It's interesting, right? But they're the ones that can see it coming.
Right.
Because these people are the ones following these students from high school. In 2007, there were 36 million households in the United States that had a child in the house under 18. We're now down to 33 million. Meanwhile, total households has gone up. So you have more households, but fewer households have a child under 18, which is just another way of telling you what we already know. Fertility's down, and even when people do have kids, they're having fewer. Countries the world over, Greece, Korea, Japan, are facing this issue. So ultimately, it may become a relative issue of who's the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry pile, or it could be totally about nothing, like the book The Population Bomb was about in 1968, that, because of the baby boomers, we were going to have all these people born, we weren't going to be able to feed them, and there'd be mass famine. Never happened. I mean, there are some trends out there that are concerning, and Japan's the example. Is the United States Japan? I don't think so. No. I think we're much more dynamic, much more open to immigration as a society. But nonetheless, the trend, again, for us isn't particularly good, and I think that has negative impacts and ramifications for the country at large and the economy itself.
We're only starting to talk about this problem now. In Europe and Asia, like you mentioned, they've been talking about this for a very, very long time. But if the crux of the problem is our relative strength to the rest of the world's economies, is it really so bad? Is this really only a problem in relative terms?
We can debate that till kingdom come. My view is if you don't have a consistent march of young people coming into your economy, that is going to put a cap on your ability to innovate and do new things. And if the world over, if the rich world, especially the ones with resources today, the world over, are collectively going to start declining in population, why would you have any reason to think that now dwindling population is going to innovate its way out of that problem? I mean, ultimately, you're just going to find some level of equilibrium. And the trends now are telling you we're not there. We went up. We had all these kids. The world over had all these babies. And now we're coming back down as kind of a curve.
We've seen birth rates, fertility rates decline so much across the board in so many communities, rich and poor. We've seen that the decline in fertility rates within the United States is not matching up to rich and poor. It really does seem like there is something much bigger going on here globally. I mean, it's insane how widespread this is.
Only Africa as a continent has a fertility rate at or above the replacement level of 2.1. Only Africa. In 1960, among the OECD, the consortium of rich countries, the fertility rate was about 3. In the United States, it was about 3.6. By the year 2000, the United States was at just a shade above 2, and the rest of the OECD averaged like 1.6. Now, as of, I think this is 2023, high-income countries in the OECD are 1.4, and the U.S. is all the way down now to 1.6. So my father was born in 1965. In one generation term, we've gone from a fertility rate in the United States of 3.5 to 1.6, less than half in one term. It's a huge change in demographics. At the same time, mortality, infant mortality in the United States dropped, 80%? Dropped from 25 per 1,000 to 5.5. So we basically got this now down to a science, except the getting pregnant part.
Well, I'm going to have to push back on you a little bit about the kids staying alive longer. I think, unfortunately, we have seen infant mortality struggle in some places in this country, in some communities in this country, and we are lagging far behind the developed world. We're squarely in the middle of the world when it comes to infant mortality, especially when you start breaking it up by race. But
Yeah, I mean, just to put a finer point on that, give you the stat. I mean, in the US, it's 5.5. Among those OECD countries I mentioned, it's at 4.
And I read one article. It was a write-up of a peer-reviewed study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, ringing the alarm bells. They're saying right now in America, if we were to compare ourselves to Europe and some of the better parts of Asia, there's about 25% of Americans who are dying that wouldn't die in those other countries based on their healthcare systems, general health, things like that. That number goes up to 50% for under 65-year-olds. Originally, when they were doing this research, they thought they were going to tell a story about how many young people were killed by COVID-19, and they found out that there was a much bigger story going on there. Through 2010, thanks to cancer innovations, AIDS innovations, really cardiovascular, circular treatments, and violent crime dropping, for our generation, mortality rate decreased. But starting in 2010, it started increasing rapidly. Part of that was from drug overdoses. Part of that was because our cardiovascular health stopped increasing. Guns, suicide, and car fatalities are all way, way up. So unfortunately, this narrative that we're having less kids and people are living longer, the trends I'm talking about are much shorter than the trends we're talking about with the fertility and the marriage rates. But unfortunately, I think we're starting to see some of the things dampening our fertility rates also starting to affect us in the here and now.
Yeah, these are negative societal cues. Not to get off topic, but the auto fatality one you mentioned, it doesn't make sense. I was shocked when I read that.
To get back to the fertility side of the issue, if 800,000 Americans more are being born that are dying every year, and if we're bringing in 3 million immigrants a year, that would put us just over the 2.1 threshold. Isn't this issue settled? Isn't this only an issue if Trump, in his short-term political objectives, is successful in really ending our status as a nation of immigrants? Doesn't immigration just solve this issue for us?
Numerically, sure, immigration would solve it, unless you're going to do anything about the actual fertility rate itself. And if you want to just put a number on it and say we hit 2.1, mission accomplished, let's all go home, we can end right here. But I think what we're discussing in this topic is the creation of communities that drives the economy that we have. There's no country out there that has a declining population or a population that is particularly old in terms of distribution for its total population that's doing particularly well. And I'd much rather have a population that has a bunch of little kids running around and live in that country than the one that didn't. Looking at this with you, back to the late 50s in the United States, fertility rates, they've come down in an absolute fashion. In that downtrend, you do see little pops, right, that happen within a 10-year horizon. And a couple that I want to call out is when unemployment fell into 1970, fertility rate went up. Then there was a recession, fertility rate collapsed. And unemployment in the 1970s, as well as inflation, went up, up, and away. 81 recession happens. Unemployment goes up, then starts coming down. Inflation craters. What do you think happened to fertility from 1981 to 1990? It went up. As unemployment fell, as inflation fell, fertility went up. Move on to the late 90s, the boom times. Low inflation, low unemployment. What happened to fertility? It went up. So then you get into just before the financial crisis, 2007. Again, You have inflation flat. You have unemployment falling. What happened to fertility? It went up. And then the financial crisis hit. And unemployment blew out. And ever since then, the slope, the rate of change has gotten worse for us. There's even fewer, right? The rate of change from 1960 to 2008 was better than the trend from 2008 to now. So we've never even come close to recovering out of the financial crisis. Then you had COVID happen. What do you think happened to fertility? It actually went up, right? You would expect that. But now, the 2023 data that we have, it's fallen off again. That shouldn't surprise you. Inflation spiked. So what's telling to me is that you have these periods where inflation is falling or is low, unemployment is low or falling, and what happens? People have kids. Another way to say it is you have this constant uncertainty We have this more neurotic than ever population, in part due to social media, smartphones, whatever. I'm not even going to get into it. We shouldn't be surprised that fertility is low. And we should be doing things to create the incidence of building relationships in order to get to, hopefully, higher fertility rates. These fertility rates are just another way of kind of looking at the marriage rate. People don't get married when nobody has a job. People don't get married when inflation's high and your future looks bleak or particularly uncertain. Everybody's too smart now. Everybody knows the deal. Well, you were researching for this before. You said now that there's a higher proportion of women with a college degree marrying a man without a college degree than ever before. That trend is probably going to keep going up. That says to me you have a lot of educated women versus 1, 2, 3 generations ago. You don't think they know how to balance their own accounts? I'm sure they can.
I think one thing that's really interesting is that the only people who aren't freaking out about this are mainstream Democrats. And yet, all of the solutions that we typically think of when we think about how can we incentivize folks to have more kids, we think about pretty standard progressive priorities. We talk about childcare. We talk about healthcare. We talk about tax credits for growing families.
And none of it's working. And that's not just the U.S. None of this shit where Kobi is working really anywhere demonstrably. There's pockets where it's having a positive micro effect, where you could write a nice story on it. But in terms of actually increasing marriage rates or increasing fertility rates, not having a lick of a difference. I mean, Japan's been trying this since 1989. Only in 2017 did they say that, having 25,000 children on a wait list for childcare is a bad idea. Maybe we should do something about it. And now they've got that down to like 5,000. That took 30 years for them to figure out.
To me, I think one of the headwinds that these policies face, are they encouraging couples who are thinking about having kids to pull the trigger? Are they giving couples who've already decided that they want to have kids, making it easier for them to invest even more in their kids? And there seems to me to be sort of a quality versus quantity thing here. Red states tend to have higher fertility rates. Blue states tend to have better child poverty rates and child literacy rates. Although when I was really trying to drill into those numbers state by state by state and look at the trends, Western states are doing a great job, no matter how red they are. There are a couple of blue states that have such big urban populations, they're doing a little worse than you'd think they are. But the big problem in terms of outcomes for children, and one of the few places in the country where fertility rates are still super high, is, of course, the South. But at the same time, people are spending a lot more time with their kids, especially fathers. It's about 2.5 to 7 hours more per week.
And that is a great thing. But as you touched on, that is not an inducement to get into a relationship, get married, and have children. That is a benefit post-birth. It's great that fathers are more involved in households, but that only helps, the parental leave to the extent it's even available. And policies in the U.S. vary widely on how much parental leave you receive as a worker. It's not an inducement to have a child. If you're sitting and talking about this with your significant other, are you saying, because I get 8 weeks of leave, 16 weeks of leave, let's have a kid? No. No one is doing that. It's a ridiculous proposition. So as good as it is to have that, it's not an inducement to solve the issue, which is lack of household formation.
It is a symptom of a community, of a culture, of a country that is stagnating. But are we sure, especially if populations are dropping worldwide, that investing more in our children, doing a better job of raising our children, spending more time with them isn't a boon on its own? Isn't that maybe a better world?
Maybe. I mean, the youth sports industry would agree with you. I don't think that the proliferation of specialization in sports is not related to fewer children being born.
Oh.
And with it because there's fewer children, there's simply going to be fewer sports leagues. These sport leagues become more specialized. Kids have to go into one thing. Think of your local little league. Your local little league, one generation ago, as we discussed, right, where my dad's example was twice as large as it is now, if we're looking at fertility rates. The fertility rate now is 1.6, and in 1960 it was 3.5. That double it, right? So that means your little league population in little town America is half of what it was. Can't support it anymore. Create a travel team. Travel 2 towns over to play another team. You don't get to play. Your kid doesn't get to play because he's not good enough to beat the other team. Washes out.
Right. And I
So
think with more specialization, with more kids being one sport kids in middle school, in high school, that leads to more repetitive motion injuries, which leads to kids being worn out by the time they make it to the pros, which leads to more load management. But I'm
this
not
is
trying to
not a
save the
load management podcast.
NBA.
This is not a load man. You're not. I know what that is. You're not tricking me like you did with Dune. I know it. You're not getting me on load management. This is not a load management podcast. We don't believe in that. The people came to see you play. Can we go over some direct incentives? Child tax credits, $2,200 per kid. The child and dependent care tax credit, you can get an additional up to $2,100. There's various flexible spending accounts. There's education savings accounts. We got the new Trump accounts of $1,000 in some investment vehicle that who the hell knows how you get to claim it. South Korea and Greece, some of the world's lowest fertility rates. They've tried tax relief payments to new parents, daycare voucher, rise in the minimum wage, pension increases, social contribution reductions. None of it's worked. None of it's had an effect. All of these things, to the extent they have any impact, help after the birth. Think about it. Are any of these things going to tip you and your partner into having your first child? Oh, you think because there's a Trump account where $1,000 can get claimed off of some website and maybe in 30 years it's worth X, that's going to induce you to have a child? It's patently ridiculous. Next, paternal leave. You got these laws or policies that protect employees' roles while they're spending time with their children. It's great. There's wide variations, implementation globally on these things. Some people actually get no days. You had a baby, congratulations, you're back to work next day. Maybe you get 2 weeks, and in some countries you get 2 years. In the US, what I found was that 4 to 16 weeks was like the most common among professional services workers. Good and nice, but in reality, people wind up not taking the full amount, or it results in one of the partners exiting the workforce entirely. Why? Because the cost of care is so much greater than that parent made when they were working. All that 4 months gets you is a brief reprieve before an onslaught of costs that you know are coming. You're not stupid. Is this going to tip you and your partner into having a child? No.
I love all this stuff. I want all this stuff. If fertility incentives is how we sell investing in Americans to MAGA voters, to red states, I'm all for it. But I think here's another example of how this stuff is really good, but it's not doing the thing it said it does, which is increasing the fertility rate. I've seen a lot of studies that the paternal leave for fathers is credited as being one of the major drivers of this increased fatherdom that we're seeing across the board, and that there was a specific effort to measure whether the increased time that fathers spent with their kids during the pandemic would lead to them spending more time with them post-pandemic. People were able to demonstrate pretty convincingly that spending time with your kid as early as possible in that child's lifetime is going to really increase the amount of time that you spend with that kid throughout their childhood. One researcher described it as fatherhood habits are sticky. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody is hearing that and going, well, now it's time for me to have a kid.
I mean, you're driving home this theme of like, we're doing a much better job of, well, I shouldn't say we are, because I think the jury may still be out. Seems like we're doing the right things more after a child is born to give them what they need and want. Maybe in some cases it's overkill, but at the same time, it's hard for me to say that it is, because there are straight up children that are 10, 12, 14 years old with 7-figure incomes, right? I don't think that didn't happen by accident. Whether or not that's good or bad, it depends on where you sit. I mean, all I was coming from on that is it seems in some ways the kids today are doing some truly spectacular kids versus even ones from one generation before.
I think that's interesting. And obviously, we always feel like that, especially in the age of social media. There's always people younger than us who are more successful than us. But I actually think that it's the opposite. It's that, when you are a subsistence farmer, when you are trying to make ends meet during the Industrial Revolution, a child is an investment. A child is going to start contributing to the household after just a couple of years. That's not the case today. And I wonder if in some ways, that's the biggest economic incentive of them all. The fact that you're never, ever, ever, as a parent, parenting the way that you're supposed to parent in 2025, going to see any sort of economic incentive from having that kid.
I sometimes call my little guy, I refer to him as our R&D project. Money only goes in, nothing's coming out. But yeah, I mean, that speaks to economic incentives. A mother and father were able to make a decision where that having that incremental child meant food on the table. And now the incremental child may mean not having food on the table. So what are they going to do? Not have the kid, right? So what you're saying is ultimately we need to provide an environment where people are employed and able to afford a certain lifestyle. And with that, the hope is that coupling and with it fertility rises.
Trump's got a new approach that I'm really struggling to even invent a logic for. His transportation secretary announced that they are going to start prioritizing states and communities with higher than average birth and marriage rates in terms of getting them transportation grants. There's no way a statewide fertility incentive is ever going to work, is it?
What? We're going to tie transportation benefits for roads and bridges to whether or not your marriage and fertility rates are high. So if my marriage and fertility rate's low, I'm at risk of bridge collapse. Is that really a proposal, Kobi?
It is a real proposal, but of course it's in complete bad faith. It's just a really great way of getting transportation money to red states and not to blue states.
Again, how does that induce somebody? Say people are already coupled. They already did the hard work. They found each other. Now they want to have a kid, and they're doing the math. Does that induce them to have a kid? No. Like, that is so stupid. In 2007, the proportion of households in the United States with a child under 18 was 47%. It's now down to 39% and falling. The trend is terrible. That's not a trend that's just going to pop up over a year or two. The iPhone was also released in 2007. So at the same time, now you have the proliferation of social media and smartphones. Same time as the financial crisis.
The last big part of Trump's fertility policy, at least on the campaign trail, was his support of IVF. He has sort of taken a lot of flack for failing to make good on those promises. Is IVF the answer here? If we're all going to have kids later, if we're all going to prioritize our financial security first.
Look, I'm not against it, but it's not. This doesn't solve the issue. You touched on it in your setup. If we are all getting on in life longer and taking longer to get more economic secure, is this the answer? No, the answer is economic security sooner. It's sooner, so that there is no IVF treatments that are required because you're not 36 and trying to have your first child. I don't mean to be insensitive, but if these people were 23 to 26, we wouldn't be talking about IVF. You have people that are trying to get pregnant. They want to be pregnant. They're at a place where they've achieved the comfort level they need to feel the confidence to bring the child into the world. And, they try this treatment and they spend tens of thousands of dollars on it. And we're going to expand access as if that's the answer? No. The use of IVF is just symptomatic of the underlying cause.
We're talking about 10 million people in the history of IVF have been born through IVF. That's amazing for so many families out there. I don't think that's putting a dent in the global fertility crisis.
No, certainly not. So there's people, the way I see it, Kobi, is there's like two groups of people that are having children. The bottom 20% and the top 20%. And the middle 60 has basically thrown in the towel. And they're smart enough to do the numbers themselves, and they don't want to put themselves and their potential child through the economic strife that they think they'd experience. Don't begrudge anybody for making that choice. But I mean, I think that's what it boils down to, is a lack of economic security.
The fertility rate's going down because the marriage rate's going down. The marriage rate's going down because the coupling rates going down, and the coupling rates going down because people are spending more time by themselves with phones. And some of the people who are looking at the scope of this problem, who are saying, how is it possible that every community, every culture, every country in the world is facing this problem? There has to be one big universal factor behind this if the magnitude of the problem is so universal. The cell phone, having now penetrated most of the world, would kind of fit that description of a big universal factor that's getting people to change their relationships, not just with their communities writ large, but with each other one-on-one. I do want to talk about one fertility incentive that does seem to have been incredibly successful. This is in the country of Georgia.
We're so beyond my scope, but go ahead.
There is a patriarch in Georgia, so their equivalent of a bishop, I think maybe a pope, somewhere in between there, who basically he personally guaranteed that if you're having your third kid or your fourth kid, etc., any kid past your second kid, he would personally baptize that child. Obviously, it's an adorable example, and it works in a country that's a little smaller like Georgia is. But the reason they wanted to shout out this example was because it was not a financial incentive to have kids. It definitely wasn't a short-term financial incentive to have kids. It was a societal incentive to have kids. It was a way for the culture, the community, the country to say, we really want you to have kids, and we really respect you, and we value you, and we will affirm you for having kids. And so I think it's really interesting to ask ourselves, what would our equivalent be of a beloved spiritual leader giving us that extra little push to have kids? I'm not even going to start speculating.
What in society do Americans value so much that it would provide an inducement to have a third child?
You know,
I mean, this was a country of under 4 million, but I mean, it's a great call out by you because look, they tapped into a societal factor, right? As you said, not necessarily an economic one. What would that be in the United States? No idea.
It's tempting to say it would be somebody like LeBron James,
Taylor Swift tickets,
or Taylor Swift, or Tom Brady. But I want to, but like
not Tom Brady. We talking about Tom Brady?
Yeah, active father kisses his son on the lips, Tom Brady.
You think that's going to induce people to have their third child?
Well, I'm just saying that, like, I feel like in our society, you know, those are the people that we kind of say we put on a pedestal. Like,
yeah, sure, fine.
I'm only bringing this up to say that I think one of the coolest, one of the most positive, one of the things that makes me proudest to be an American man in 2025 is the way in which fatherdom has been portrayed in sports. You know, we grew up with MJ and Kobi, the sports psychopath who woke up every morning trying to figure out how to kill you. And now we have Steph and LeBron. We have MLB players that have switched teams because they wanted to be able to hang out with their kids in the dugout. We know the kids of our favorite athletes. You know, in our house, huge Deuce Tatum fans. And again, I think that the way in which, if you want to look for positive trends in 2025, look no further than fatherhood. If you're feeling a crisis of masculinity in 2025, look no further than the way in which fathers are stepping up in public and in private in every single demographic, in every state, in every race in this country. Fathers are stepping up, and if we need something to be proud of as men, I look no further. It's there, and we're being led by the great sports leaders of our time. How do we translate that to them showing up and baptizing your kid? I don't know. But I do just, in a world in which we are so pessimistic, I do want to just give a shout out for this one really incredible positive trend. The UK has these amazing numbers on how many dads have changed a diaper. And like 1949, it was 43%, and now it's like in the high 90s. I wish we had numbers like that for the United States.
I don't know a single
I wish that was the answer.
Who has not change a diaper.
Right.
100% for people I know easily. And I would say, you know, I definitely notice more other families that are out now that, you know, I have, you know, a son of my own. And I got to tell you, at least in public, everywhere I go, I mean, it just seems like the dads are awesome.
I think there's only one way that we could possibly end this podcast. Banker Bill, give us your pitch. Why should we be having kids in 2025? What from your personal experience is making you think more people should be doing this?
All right, I'll give you two perspectives. The first, children are your own insurance policy. And by raising your children,
Bill.
and treating them well. I can't even finish.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for listening to Is It Bad for the Economy? We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're everywhere. And we know we've got some diehard listeners now. I got called out at a party for making a point that I had previously made on the podcast. And I'd like to thank Nick for being such a disciplined listener. But if you love enjoying this podcast, if you want to call me at a party for repeating myself, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, on Apple. It is the number one way that we can reach a bigger audience, the number one way that we can improve the economic and political conversation that we're having in this country. And I also want to ask folks if they're interested to follow our short form video platforms. I've been doing a lot on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok.
The reaction to those videos has been astounding. I'm shocked on how good the reaction's been. I mean, they're quite good. So, excellent work by you on those.
Thank you so much. Is It Bad for the Economy on YouTube, on TikTok? You can get there from our website, isitbadfortheeconomy.com, where you can also get on the email list, which is the best way to keep in touch with all Is It Bad for the Economy updates.
Human life is a gift, and to be able to have a happy and healthy little son running around, it gives me joy every day.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition. It takes a little time